Yesterday morning, I had the best morning. I got to spend some time in the sukkah with the 2-year-olds from the Channon preschool. We shook the lulav and we smelled the etrog and we marveled at the loud noise of an airplane passing overhead and how, when we were really, really quiet, we could also hear the birds chirping. We sat crisscross applesauce on the warm cement, and one of the teachers took a big, deep breath. We could all use one. And as she exhaled, she said, "It smells like Sukkot." And it does. Whether your schach, those are the branches overhead, whether your schach is made of bamboo, or palm fronds, or corn husks, or maple leaves, somehow every sukkah brings with it the smell of fall and the joy of the season. I've lived in many places, and in each one, the sukkah takes on the personality of its climate. I remember as a child in Buffalo, when Sukkot came late and winter came early, that morning a fine coat of frost was on the floor of our sukkah. In San Francisco, the peninsula, I know it wasn't really San Francisco, the Sukkot was often met with cold winds, foggy mornings, and misty nights that left our handmade decorations a little soggy. And here in Arizona, of course, where the sun draws these beautiful shadow patterns on the floor, we also have to be careful in the heat, making sure our children stay hydrated and our lulav doesn't wither. The sukkah does very, very little to protect us from the elements, whether it be sun or rain or snow. Standing on its temporary legs with its open walls and leafy roof, in the sukkah, we have nowhere to hide. In the sukkah, we face the world head on. We are exposed there. We are vulnerable. And I'll be the first to admit it. Sitting in the sukkah can sometimes be uncomfortable. I know that many of us have been glued to the news this week. We are watching the unfolding of 2 human stories and their impact on our government, our future, our children, and our culture. It has been painful to hear and excruciating to watch the tears, the shaking voices, the raw and real emotion. And it feels impossible not to project our own experiences, our own sensitivities, our own circumstance, and our own fears on the events that are unfolding before us. We can all see ourselves in these stories. Most of us have been teenagers who have made unwise decisions. Most of us have kept secrets. Most of us have been hurt. We have all been afraid, embarrassed, ashamed, and angry. And statistically speaking, nearly a quarter of us are survivors of violence or assault. In hearing these stories, in trying to understand who we are as a nation, in bearing witness to the raw vulnerability of these testimonies, we also, all of us, are acutely aware of our own vulnerability. We call Sukkot Zman Simchatenu, the season of our joy. It is not just an observation that Sukkot is a joyful time, but an obligation. Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, we say, as we sit down to dwell in the sukkah together. It is a mitzvah, a commandment, to participate in the rituals of this holy and happy time. And our greeting, Moadim l'simcha, may this season be one of simcha, of happiness. No matter the rain or the snow or the wind or the heat, no matter the elements or the discomfort, no matter the bugs or the flimsy folding chair or the broken heat lamp, our tradition teaches us to hunker down in the sukkah, determined to make it a joyful season. Author, storyteller, and researcher Brené Brown writes and talks about shame, emotion, and connection. In her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, She digs into the difference between people who are content, living with a strong sense of love and belonging, and others who struggle to find that same sense of contentment. A key difference, she explains, is their embrace of vulnerability. The open-hearted, courageous people, she explains, tell their stories with their whole heart, with the courage to be imperfect. She goes on to say, they fully embraced vulnerability. They believed that what made them vulnerable made them beautiful. They didn't talk about vulnerability as being comfortable, nor did they talk about it as being excruciating. They just talked about it being necessary. They talked about the willingness to say, I love you first, the willingness to do something when there are no guarantees, the willingness to breathe through waiting for the doctor to call after your mammogram. They're willing to invest in a relationship that may or may not work out. They thought this was fundamental. It's counterintuitive to imagine that facing the most awkward or difficult or uncomfortable truths about our lives might also be what enables us to be the most comfortable with ourselves. But perhaps this is what the rabbis understood when they asked us to spend 7 days outdoors in the desert heat and call it joyful. The season of our joy is not the one where we recline on pillows and lean to the left, or the time of year where we allow ourselves to drink so much we don't know the difference between Haman and Mordecai. It's not the season of gifts. It's not even the season where we celebrate the gift of Torah. Zman Simchatenu, the season of our joy, is now, as we emerge from the soul-bearing confessions of Yom Kippur and into the raw fragility of Sukkot. We are called to be joyful now, at our most authentic, our most courageous, our most open-hearted, and our most vulnerable. There was nothing joyful about watching the news this week. So many of us were filled with rage or fear or frustration or indignation or pain or trauma or worry. We are all affected by what is playing out before us as history unfolds before our eyes. And then we enter the sukkah. We take that deep breath, and we are transported to the sweetest edges of our memories, laughing over a shared meal even as we balanced on a creaky folding chair, challah and juice with friends in the sukkah during Sunday school despite the unpredictable weather, the smell of the etrog, standing with the rabbi and shaking the lulav together hand over hand. Perhaps we even spent the night outdoors with our brothers or sisters, counting the stars through the slats in the roof, even if we had to come indoors at 3 a.m. because it started to rain. The world is changing around us, and it may feel like our structures are too impermanent, too shaky, like we are at the mercy of the elements. These are uncomfortable times. The joy of Sukkot does not come from the weakness that we feel in the face of our fragility. Rather, from the strength that we find as together we make our way through. A mitzvah of Sukkot is to gather guests called ushpizin. We rally around the people who see us as we are, as freshly scrubbed souls, encountering the world in all of its confusion and ambiguity. And on Sukkot, as the sun goes down and the stars come out, we sit together in our discomfort, in the sukkah that we have built to hold us together through whatever the world might offer us. We look for joy as we allow each other to see the broken pieces of our souls. And by beginning that hard conversation, we help each other to be whole. We return to that deep, full breath. It smells like Sukkot. We are vulnerable. We are open-hearted. Let us work together to find the joy. Moadim l'simcha and Shabbat Shalom.